History teaches that Custer made his last stand at the Little Bighorn. But what if the story you know is only half true? One cavalryman, Sergeant Daniel Kanipe, lived through it all, and his account doesn't just question the official version, it turns it upside down. From desperate retreats and confused orders to the haunting silence that followed the massacre, Kanipe's forgotten testimony reveals a version of this legendary battle most Americans have never heard. This is the untold story of Custer's last stand through the eyes of the man who narrowly escaped it. Before we continue, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. As smoke rose over the Little Bighorn, one man turned his horse away from the sound of gunfire, unaware that every friend he'd ever ridden beside was about to die. Sergeant Daniel Kanipe didn't just survive Custer's last stand. He carried the final words of a doomed commander, and what he revealed afterwards still leaves historians shaken to this day. Our ill-fated march began on May 17, 1876, heading toward the Yellowstone River. After 12 miles, we set up camp by the Big Heart River, pausing to scout the area. By June 10th, we advanced to the Powder River, where 6 of our 12 companies were sent on reconnaissance. We packed 10 days' rations on mules and began a 2-day journey upriver. Following signs of an Indian trail along the Rosebud River, we marched through the night, sustained only by coffee and determination. The next morning, realizing our rations were nearly gone, General Reno, our commander, ordered a retreat back down the Rosebud. There we met the remaining 6 companies under General Custer and General Terry, the department commander. At that time, Custer was reportedly under arrest for challenging corrupt post merchants who were profiting off the troops, a scandal dating back to President Grant's administration. Despite the tension, Custer soon regained command. His men received supplies from the steamboat located far to the west, which carried provisions sufficient for 15 days. At that moment, none of us understood that we were merely days away from the calamity that would forever engrave the Battle of the Little Bighorn into the annals of American history. Custer possessed 2 Gatling guns and 2 Rodman cannons, yet he relinquished them to General Gibbon, convinced that they would not be necessary. In retrospect, that choice proved to be a costly error. Had even a single Rodman been discharged, the result could have been markedly different. With just 1 Gatling gun, it is conceivable that the Custer massacre might never have occurred at all. On June 22nd, we dismantled our camp and marched throughout the day. That evening, Custer issued strict directives: no bugle calls, only hand signals, and fires kept small enough to merely brew coffee. The following morning, June 23rd, we set out once more, marching until dusk before taking a break. By June 24th, we arrived at a location where the Indians had recently performed a war dance and a sun dance. The ground was compacted and smooth, with cottonwood brush huts still standing as remnants of their gathering. Our Crow scouts soon discovered a grim reminder: the scalp of a white soldier from Gibbon's command, dangling from a willow branch. The scouts, who were adversaries of the Sioux we were tracking, erupted in a frenzy of excitement, shouting and dancing, almost consumed by rage. They presented the scalp to General Custer, who scrutinized it before passing it around. Ultimately, it found its way to Sergeant Finley of my company, where it remained in his saddlebag at the time of his demise. That night, around 10 o'clock, our scouts returned with updates. The darkness was such that the dim summer light still allowed for reading at 9. We received orders to pack our belongings and depart. Throughout the night, we progressed toward the confluence of the Little Bighorn and Rosebud rivers. Custer guided us into a concealed gully, an ideal location for remaining hidden. However, Quartermaster Sergeant Hurst lost a portion of the hardtack from the pack train during the rapid trot. Upon hearing this, Custer instructed Hurst to return and recover it, only for the sergeant to discover 2 Indians already helping themselves to the fallen bread. When the Indians noticed our approach, they fled. Sergeant Hurst came back and reported the incident to General Custer, who promptly ordered us to prepare our horses. I initially thought he intended to launch an attack at dawn, but given that the enemy was already aware of our presence, he opted to strike that very night. We paused after ascending the divide, and Custer advanced with 2 scouts and Henry Voss, the chief trumpeter. 2 hours later, he returned and organized the regiment into 3 detachments. Major Reno was assigned the companies A, M, and G. Captain Benteen received companies H, K, and D. Captain McDougal was tasked with guarding the pack train with Company B, while Custer retained Companies C, E, I, and F. Under his direct command, Reno was positioned to Custer's left, with Benteen further left, and the strategy was evident. A three-pronged assault on the Indian village was planned. McDougal's pack train would follow the main trail behind us. We proceeded along what is now known as Benteen's Creek, where we discovered a recently abandoned Indian camp. Fires were still smoldering, and within one teepee lay a deceased warrior. Custer commanded that the teepee be set ablaze. When Reno arrived, he was instructed to cross the creek, which he did, while Custer advanced with his companies. As we approached the confluence of Benteen's Creek and the Little Bighorn, I noticed Indians observing from the bluffs. I alerted First Sergeant Bobo, and Custer ordered troops C, I, and F to ascend the heights. Captain Tom Custer, the general's brother, led my company. We rode swiftly, but by the time we reached the summit, the Indians had disappeared, although their extensive camp was visible across the valley, with teepees stretching for miles. Some Crow scouts attempted to sneak down to steal ponies, but gunfire forced them to retreat. Bloody Knife Curly and Chief Scout Mitch Boyer remained with us on the bluffs as we readied ourselves to strike. The men became increasingly agitated, shouting upon finally spotting the camp below. I was alongside Captain Tom Custer and Sergeant Finkel, who exclaimed that he was nearing his breaking point. None of us could have anticipated how close we were to the impending battle that would soon claim nearly every man present. Sergeant Finkel's horse was struggling. I shouted, "Finkel, if you can, come on." However, he fell behind. At that moment, Captain Tom Custer instructed me to locate Captain McDougal and the pack train to deliver urgent orders from General Custer. "Instruct McDougal to relocate the packs to higher ground," he commanded. "If they become loose, do not stop to secure them. Cut them free and move swiftly." "There is a large Indian camp ahead." I set off immediately. What I initially perceived as misfortune, being dispatched away, ultimately turned out to preserve my life. Had Finkel not fallen back, he would have received the order instead, and I might not be here to recount this tale. In the distance, I observed dust rising from the pack train like a faint cloud. As my company charged down towards the Indian village, I rode in the opposite direction. Custer's final words continue to resonate in my memory. We were all riding vigorously when he shouted, "Hold your horses, boys! There is plenty down there for all of us." After delivering the message to McDougal, I proceeded to Captain Benteen as instructed. By that time, Major Reno was retreating from the valley, with McDougal's men ascending the bluffs to support him. Behind them, there was chaos, with Indians shouting, gunfire erupting, and men collapsing under a barrage of arrows and bullets. Before we could reach them, warriors were already scalping the deceased. Dr. DeWolf was killed just as he reached the summit. A few more steps, and he might have survived. As I followed Benteen back, I noticed riders approaching. I raised my weapon, prepared to fire, but they turned out to be frightened scouts fleeing the main conflict, racing all the way to the Powder River. I rejoined Benteen's battalion at the ridge, connecting with Reno and McDougal's forces. We were unable to reunite with Custer's men. The Indians had completely cut us off. As Reno attempted to advance down the bluffs, we were overwhelmed by the warriors, which compelled us to retreat in a skirmish line formation. We suffered significant losses before we could withdraw. The Indians encircled us, continuously firing until nightfall. When dawn arrived on June 26th, they attacked once more, their war cries resonating throughout the valley. As the second day of torment commenced, I cannot quantify the number of enemies we killed, but it was substantial. Nevertheless, the cost was devastating. 68 of our men were injured, and we found ourselves entirely cut off from water. It was heartbreaking to hear their pleas for a single drink that we were unable to provide. A few attempted to reach the river. Most did not return. I will never forget the first shot fired during that 2-day siege. It struck the ground near me and zipped directly beneath my horse's belly. Lieutenants Harrington and Sturgis, along with 14 soldiers, were never located. Some claimed that the Indians took their heads and paraded them through the camp during their night-long festivities. On the hilltop, we lost 56 men. The gunfire on the 26th persisted from morning until dusk. By evening, we observed the Indian camp beginning to mobilize, with women packing their belongings while warriors continued to shoot at us. When dawn broke on June 27th, the valley was eerily quiet. The Indians had vanished. We prepared coffee, gathered water, and tended to the wounded as best as we could. Around 10 o'clock, General Gibbon and General Terry arrived. We erupted in cheers upon seeing them, and Terry, overwhelmed with emotion, broke down in tears. Then came the news that none of us wished to hear. Custer and his 4 companies had been annihilated, with 200 men dead in the valley below. For a time, we had hoped they were merely trapped as we had been, but deep down, we already understood the truth. Later that afternoon, I rode with Captain Benteen across the battlefield. The scene was unbearable. I recognized several friends, including Sergeants Finkel and Finley. Finley lay next to his horse, 12 arrows embedded in him, still grasping the reins. They had been lying in the sun for 2 days, disfigured beyond recognition. The women and young warriors had stripped every body, beating and stabbing any man who still clung to life. Not a single soldier remained in his uniform. The Indians had taken everything: weapons, boots, money, nearly $25,000 in pay, issued to us just days before at Powder River. And that is how it concluded. The dust settled, the valley fell silent, and the legend of Custer's last stand was forever inscribed in blood and sorrow. I witnessed where the last of them fell, gathered in a small pile. Custer lay across his men, his back barely grazing the ground, a bullet lodged in his heart. Surrounding him were his brother, Captain Tom Custer, and his brother-in-law, Lieutenant Calhoun of H Troop. There were nearly 4,000 warriors in this final confrontation, part of a force numbering between 12 and 15,000 in total. Custer and his men never had a chance. Not a single soldier survived to recount what transpired after that final stand. Only Comanche, Captain Keogh's horse, endured. Riddled with 7 bullets when they discovered him, the field was strewn with both soldiers and fallen warriors. Approximately 75 Indians lay dead within 3 teepees, and more were carried away as the great camp continued its journey. I encountered one warrior wrapped in buffalo robes. Upon cutting him loose, I found he bore 4 women's scalps, 2 with long red hair, strung together like trophies. The sight made me feel nauseous. I discarded them immediately. After the fighting ceased, we buried our dead and began the arduous task of transporting the wounded to the Far West steamboat. The vessel advanced as far up the river as it could before returning to Yellowstone. Most of the injured managed to recover in some way, including Comanche, the sole survivor of Custer's command. Subsequently, headquarters issued an order for Comanche to be provided with a stall for the remainder of his life. He became a living tribute, looked after by a soldier from the 7th Cavalry Band, adorned in black during parades, serving as a quiet emblem of the events that transpired on that fateful day. Once everything had concluded, the Sioux and Cheyenne dismantled their camp and moved forward. Triumphant and without opposition, we were too shattered to give chase. Their victory was absolute. Thus, the Battle of the Little Bighorn came to a close, not in glory but in silence. Should this narrative offer you a fresh viewpoint on the Great Sioux War of 1876, remain with this channel for additional untold historical accounts.